Hey, what is going on everyone? It's Jonathan. Welcome back to another video, and if you've read the title of this video, you pretty much know what you're in for. This is going to be my first year-end list video I've ever done on this channel, of course because I started my channel back in July. So, you know, a lot of music reviewers and YouTubers and anything related to music will always do these type of videos for, like, you know, year-end lists, like best albums of the year or, you know, best songs of the year and stuff like that. So, you know, there's no way I could have passed that up because literally there's a lot of great albums that were released this year. I mean, this is probably one of the best years for rock music I've seen, like in the past decade, if I'm being honest. You know, there's a lot of great albums that were released this year, and so I can't wait to talk to you guys about them. Like I said before, you know, rock music really had a great year this year, and, you know, music in general, I have to say, did pretty good this year. Of course, you know, there's a lot of bad music that was released this year, just like any other year. It's to be expected. But, you know, on this list, you're going to see a couple of albums that you actually wouldn't expect for me to put on this list. And mainly in the honorable mentions, you're going to see a lot of albums that you didn't think that I would even put on there. These are albums, you know, I actually really liked. And, you know, they didn't quite make the cut, but of course they're honorable mentions. And so, yeah, they're really great albums overall. Definitely check these out if you haven't yet. So pretty much what I'm trying to say is expect to see albums on this list and the honorable mentions that you wouldn't expect me to put on here. Like any other list-oriented videos like top 10 countdowns and year-end lists, this is all going to be based on my opinion. So if your favorite albums do not make this list, I'm sorry. You know, it's just based on opinion. So don't get offended by that, and just please don't say in the comments, oh, where's this album, where's that album, your music taste sucks, stuff like that. I don't need any of that in the comments. It's just my list, not yours. So, you know, that's just how the way it rolls. And thanks guys for watching. Maybe like the video, subscribe, and let's get into the honorable mentions. I'm so sad.
But I hear sounds in my mind, brand new song, and all the colors bleeding on themselves, and I'm left so cold. It's out. You close your eyes to look around. Hail Mary, Jesus and Joseph, the great American. Wait for me. Stop your crying, baby, it'll be alright. They told me that the end is near. To make the champions
Alright, those were my honorable mentions. Now it's finally time to get into my top 10 favorite albums of the year. Hope you guys enjoy it, and let's get into my number 10 pick.
oh God, I ain't gonna smile if I don't want to. Hey man, we all can be like you. I wish we were almost colored too.
For my number 10 pick, I have After Laughter by Paramore. This is their 5th studio album, was released in May of 2017. Now, a lot of you guys are probably shaking your head, you're thinking, what? Why would he put this album on here, you know? But in all honesty, this album has really grown on me ever since its release. Back in May, when this album came out, I wasn't really a fan of it at all. I mean, it wasn't bad by any means, I just wasn't really vibing with it, and there was not much energy going on. Because if you know, a lot of Paramore's older albums are very energetic, pop punk, and very rock based music. But this album is more of a 70s and 80s pop rock album, kind of like a throwback sound in a way. And you know, that kind of threw me off a bit. But after giving this album plenty of listens, I think I've grown to really love this album. I know it's not for everyone, but I think this album has really grown on me. I think this album really started to grow on me a lot when I actually realized what the songs were talking about, because when I was listening to them before, I just thought they were just, you know, a dime a dozen. But after watching our ARTV's review of this album a bunch of times, I understand what he was talking about now. I read the lyrics along with it, and they're actually, you know, very personal stuff. I guess, you know, Hayley Williams, the lead singer of this band, really was going through some hard times, you know. Of course, a lot of the band members were breaking up and, you know, filing lawsuits and stuff like that. Jeremy Davis, their old bassist, really had a big feud with them in 2014 or 2013, or something like that. So they really went through some hard times, and so, you know, she made a lot of songs that can, you know, relate to other people, and I think that's why it connected with me after I actually gave them serious listens. Even though this album is very poppy in a lot of ways, it's more alternative, I guess, just because there's a lot of great bass playing, you know, great drumming from Zach Farrow, and Taylor York, the guitarist, really has to be commended for this album. He does some nice little guitar leads here and there, and it really sets the album apart from its peers in the pop community, I guess. If you know me, I'm very strict when it comes to listening to pop music, because it can either be bad or it can either be good, but this is very good in my opinion. That's why it's made this list, and it stands out tall above any other pop music in this year, because most of it is pretty garbage. Because this music actually has meaning, and you know, I love when Hayley Williams sings. She's probably one of my favorite female vocalists of all time, and you know, she just comes across as very, you know, personal. And that's why I really like this album. Alright, my number 9 pick is from a band called AYREON, and it's called The Source, and this came out sometime in April or March of 2017. Now, I'm very new to this band because I found them this year, thanks to this album pretty much, and actually it was all thanks to watching this review by Spectrum Pulse, because he reviewed this album and I watched it. You know, I was very interested because he gave it a really great score, and then I watched his other reviews of this band and he gave them really great scores, so he must really love this band a lot. So I was thinking, oh wow, you know, it's hard to see sometimes the Spectrum Pulse giving good scores, so that caught my attention right away, so I went to go listen to it. And you know, I was pretty much blown away by the first couple tracks. Then I listened to the rest, and then I started, you know, listening to it more. And you know, it's still, I've always said this is one of the best albums of the year. I remember putting it in like my top 5, but unfortunately it's my number 9 pick, and I'll definitely explain why. If you guys have never listened to this album or actually looked at the track listing, I'll have to tell you that it's a 17-track double album, and it's an hour and 30 minutes, so pretty much a 90-minute double album full of 17 tracks. Now, for some people that can already be a red flag right away. If you're not into progressive rock and progressive metal, you're definitely gonna kind of be iffy on this. For me, it's fine because I love progressive rock and metal. I always have. Well, not always, but I've grown to love it a lot more because my dad always listened to it all the time. And and of course, this band talks about a lot of, in their other albums, they talk about space and the future and, mankind and where we're going in life, what's going to happen when the world breaks down, pretty much. That's the first track on this album, actually. It's called The Day That the World Breaks Down. And it talks about different stars and different things that we're going to do in the future. And that's a lot of deep stuff. I really love topics like that. If you think of Starset, just think of it expanded even more into the future and stars and, you know, space and stuff like that. So this is already, you can tell, this is a very lengthy listen, and you really have to have the mind and the knowledge to actually get through an album like this, and any progressive rock album ever, because there's always so much to take in from the beginning. And I think the album kind of suffers from some filler tracks at the end. Pretty much I love the first disc out of the second one. The first disc has some of the best tracks of the year in my opinion, so just fantastic tracks. The ending pretty much has really great tracks as well. I think the key to listen to this album is to actually listen to the tracks individually instead of listening through the whole album by itself, because you're going to forget a lot of different things. And so yeah, this album was in my top 5 for a good chunk of the year actually, and I really loved this album back then. But as time went on, you know, more albums came out. I started to love more albums more than this one, and you know, the length really kind of did it for me, I guess. It's still a great album through and through, but a lot of the songs, some of the songs on here I should say, are kind of filler. And that's to be expected in a 90-minute album, 17 tracks. There's going to be 1 or 2 songs that are just not going to connect with you. But it's still a great album overall, and if they would have shortened it a bit, I think it would have made my top 3 at least. But unfortunately, it's a little long, so that's why it's made my number 9, and it's still a great album through and through.
New music, well that's pretty convenient, cause I just made a plate for him. And I don't hear what none of y'all are saying, I just sit at the keys feeling the music. Got me thinking on Beethoven, the game needs a makeover. If you been waiting, the wait's over. You ain't noticed y'all about to witness a takeover. Yeah, they waiting on me to match the emotion that I had in the last one. Wait, if I don't, they gon' tell me that I'm losing my passion. If I do, am I repeating my actions? Yeah, look, how could you leave us as masters?
You guys are probably wondering why I put this album on this list. One reason I put this album on this list is that it's brutally honest. Now what I mean by that is that he pretty much is in your face about what he's talking about. He goes through the, you know, the depth and the emotion of what people are going through, like, you know, teenagers or, you know, young adults and stuff like that. And he just knows what they're dealing with because he's dealt with it his whole entire life. I mean, he lost his mom to pills, an overdose, and then his dad. I don't know where his dad went. But he grew up on Eminem, and you know, he listens to all that stuff, and then started making rap on his own, and it's just always, you know, connected with me. First time I listened to his music, you know, it really connected. It stood out above everything else that I was listening to in the rap world, and that's why I don't listen to much rap, because it's so fake, so bland, there's nothing there. But with him, with this album, Perception, I think he took what worked on Therapy Session, his last album, and he made it better. And I love the orchestration he uses in this album, and he even sings a lot more in this album as well. I know it's a rap album, so not everyone's going to agree with me on this, but the people that do like rap, you definitely have to check this album out. This is easily the best rap album of the year in my opinion, because it's just so emotional and deep, and you know, really tugs at the heartstrings sometimes, and you know, it's just blatantly honest. And that's why I really love it so much, and that's why it's made my number 8 on this list. For number 7, we got Demon Hunter and their album Outlive. It was released in March or April 2017, and most of you are probably expecting this to be on here, and some of you are probably wondering why it's not higher on my list, and there's a couple of reasons for both of those. One reason is that August Burns Red released an album this year, and you know, Demon Hunter and August Burns Red are both metalcore, and so I think August Burns Red definitely made the better album this year for sure. Even though Outlive is still a great album, I think August Burns Red did a better job. But Outlive through and through is a really great album in my opinion. I know some people, like you know, some of my YouTube friends have listened to this album too much throughout this entire year and they've gotten sick of it. But for me, I didn't actually have time to listen to this album that much. I listened to it a lot of times, but I didn't actually grow sick of it. That was the time I was actually, you know, branching out and listening to their other albums and stuff. But listening to this album now for this, you know, top 10 countdown, it's still really great in my opinion. There's a lot of great tracks on this album, songs like Patience, Jesus Wept, Cold Blood, and the closer, Slight the Odds. I really love that one because of the orchestral elements they added to it. That adds a whole lot to the song, and just a great closer overall. And you know, Demon Hunter did a really great job with blending, you know, sort of heavy songs and, you know, thrash and, you know, softer songs as well. This is one of their softer albums for sure, but I still think they did a great job. And of course, Ryan Clark, the lead vocalist, is great. Vocals as usual, I really love his voice. He's turning into one of my favorite rock and metal vocalists of all time. And you know, that for good reason. He's really great at singing and, you know, his growling and stuff and screaming. Really does a great job at that. And throughout this album, he really shows off some of his skills as well. And even though this is not in my top 5 of the year, I still think this is a great album and definitely should be listened to. If you've never listened to it, definitely check it out. And you know, Demon Hunter is turning into one of my favorite bands, and it's pretty much thanks to this album, I guess you could say. And you know, that's why it's made my number 7 on this list. For my number 6 pick, we got brand new and their 5th studio album, Science Fiction, and I believe this is going to be their last album as a band. Now, this is another band I got into this year, pretty much thanks to this album and ARTV's review of this album as well. He called it a masterpiece, so I wanted to check it out because it piqued my interest. So I checked it out, and upon first listen, I fell in love with this album, no joke. I really just fell in love with everything about it. Even though it's a lot softer than a lot of the albums I'm used to hearing, and I guess you could say that this band is more emo, but the emo side really doesn't show that much. It's more deep lyrically and, you know, spiritually. I guess it's more dark in a lot of ways, and it really appealed to me, and that's why I loved it so much. As I keep listening to this album very recently, you know, I keep finding new and interesting things that I didn't find before. There's just so much depth to this album, a lot of emotion, a lot of, you know, passion, and a lot of great instrumentation, as well as the lyrics, of course. Even the song titles are very interesting, and they really catch you when you listen to the track. And you know, this band hadn't released an album in 9 years, or 8 years, I should say, 8 years. So yeah, it's just fantastic to see that this band still was making great music, and that's why it's made my number 6 on this list. For my number 5 pick, we have August Burns Red and their album Phantom Anthem. Now, if you guys have seen my review for this album back in October, you know I gave it a really great score, but since then, this album has really grown on me a lot. Even back then when the first singles were released, you know, Invisible Enemy and The Frost, after I listened to those songs, I knew this album was going to be great already. Even though I wasn't really into the band at the time, I knew this album was going to be something I was going to be interested in. And you know, when it came out, I was very shocked. You know, I was really enjoying it so much. But now, listening through it, you know, I was listening through it a couple times earlier, I'm really falling in love with this album again. And you know, it's grown on me so much since that review. And there's just, this album I could almost go to say is almost perfect, but it's not quite there. There are little tiny things here and there in some of the songs that I'm not crazy about, but it's almost there, I will say that. So that's why it's pretty much made my number 5 on this list. There's just a lot of fantastic tracks on this album, like Hero of the Half-Truth, the opener King of Sorrow, you know, Generations, Invisible Enemy, The Frost, Lifeline. There's just so many great tracks on here. And you know, that's pretty much why it's made my number 5 on this list, and it stood the test of time. And I'll definitely be listening to this album for years to come. Some of you are probably thinking, wait, what? Wasn't that his second favorite album of the year? And I'm like, yeah, it used to be, until my opinion changed. But in all honesty, this album is still fantastic in its own right, of course, because it's made the top 5, so of course it is. But 3 other albums, in my opinion, have done better in the growing and the aging department, in my opinion, and I still think every song on here is great. Even some of the even though the interludes, some of them are kind of, you know, kind of annoyed me at this point, but some of the interludes I still really like. And then Just Say When, it's a track on the album. It's grown on me quite a bit. I still say it's my least favorite, and I'll be listening to it kind of sparingly, but I still think it's pretty good overall. But pretty much every other song on this album is great. Nothing more really struck a chord with me in a lot of these songs, because a lot of these songs have very strong themes, mainly about politics, relationships, and a lot of other things. And a lot of these songs really hit home with me, and they have so much energy, and Johnny Hawkins is a vocalist. He's a fantastic vocalist, very unique, and I'm glad he's a rock vocalist, because a lot of vocalists these days are kind of like just toning it down and just trying to get into the mainstream or whatever. But he's not going to let down, I can already tell. They're going to be making rock music for a long time. And just the way he sings, he has a lot of emotion, but then he can get aggressive in some places. And a lot of these songs pretty much rock. Some of the tracks on this album are probably some of my favorite songs of the year, like Let 'Em Burn, the last track, Fade In, Fade Out, which I still think is one of my favorite songs of the year as well. And what's that other one? Who We Are is still a really great one. I still come back to that one quite often. And a lot of the album I come back to often. I like listening to the whole album because it's a great storyline. I like how the interludes connect with it. They really did a great job with the storyline as well. Like I said, the album's called The Stories We Tell Ourselves. And, there's a lot of, it's like this album's full of a lot of stories. It's almost like one big story in a way. But you can look at it different ways. That's pretty much why it's made my number 4 on this list, and it's still a fantastic album. Definitely check it out. It's worth your time if you're a rock fan, and yeah, that's why it's made my number 4 on this list. For my number 3 pick, we have Red and their album Gone. Came out on October 28th of 2017, and a lot of you were definitely expecting this to be on here. I did an album review of Gone back in October, and since then my thoughts of this album have changed quite a bit. My score might be the same, but I think it might be even a stronger 4.5 out of 5. Just because I actually understand what the band was going for on this album. This album has grown on me so much over the past couple of months, and I just can't say how great it is that I love this album to death. There's just so much to dive into in this album, and even though it's a lot shorter than I would have liked it to be, there's still a lot to dive into this album. This album packs a big punch, and in my opinion, I think a lot of these songs pretty much preach on a lot of different things about, our legacy and what we'll leave when when we die, and what we're going to leave behind, and a lot of great Christian messages in this one, but it can relate to anybody, and I think they did a great job on that theme. There's just so many great tracks on this album. Songs like Step Inside the Violence, Losing Control, AI, Singularity, even the Unstoppable cover has grown on me a lot. Even though I don't like the electronic-y part in the bridge, I think I've grown to like it because I do like the horns that they added into that song, and they just added a lot of different things in this album, and I think it really worked for them. Some people were kind of turned off by, electronics and the Unstoppable cover and the kind of poppy vibes some of the songs give. But I think Red really took a lot of risks on this album, and I think it paid off for them. And a lot of people think the same way I do, thankfully. And this is a masterpiece of an album for sure. A lot of great tracks on here, you can't go wrong. This is definitely one of Red's most diverse albums for sure. And that's why it's my number 3 on this list. For my number 2 pick, we have Trivium and their latest album, The Sin in the Sentence. Now, a lot of you were probably not expecting this album to be so high on my list. Since my review for this album, my opinions on this album have changed quite a bit actually. Even though I gave this album a very great score, I think this album exceeds that score, and I think it's even better than I realized it is. I even go to say as this album is probably one of the best metal albums I've heard in a couple of years. And that's saying something because, there's a lot of great ones out there, but this one really takes the cake. I mean, there's just so much to enjoy on this album, and Trivium just hit the nail on the mark on this one. There's just so many fantastic tracks on here, like the Wretchedness Inside, the Revanchist, finally got that title right, the title track of course, and you know, the Beauty and the Sorrow. There's just, every track on here has something to offer, and I would even go as far to say this album is almost flawless. And some people probably agree with me on that, because I know this album got pretty critically acclaimed. I know a lot of people really love this album, and they're giving Trivium another try. And so this is definitely my turning point for Trivium. I'll definitely be checking out their older material soon. You know, I never thought I would put this album so high on my list, but this album really blew my expectations out of the water, and now I've been listening to on repeat. A lot of these songs are so catchy as well. That's what makes me want to keep listening to them. And there's just so much to dig into this album, so much rich, you know, so much bravado, and the lyrics are great. The drumming, of course, I've said is fantastic. The vocals, really great, goes from cleans to uncleans in a lot of places. You know, the guitar solos, the melodic guitar playing as well is just fantastic. The bass playing, everything just comes together so beautifully, and it's just awesome to hear. And that's why this album has made my number 2 spot on this list. My number 1 pick, we have Starset and their album Vessels. Now, a lot of you are probably seeing this from a mile away, because if you've seen any of my comments on, like, you know, my top 5 albums of the year or something on the Facebook community group, you know that this album has been my favorite album of the year since its release in January. It didn't take me long for me to fall head over heels for this album, because when it first came out, I wasn't really crazy about it, but when it clicked, it absolutely did. And I've been listening to it ever since, and it really helped me through that hard time during those first 5 months of the year when it was my last semester of high school pretty much, and I was going through all these different emotions, a lot of different projects and essays. This album was pretty much there through it all. You know, this is one of those albums I can come back and listen to and never get sick of, because this album really, I guess I could say it really changed my mindset on life a bit. Because at that time when the album came out, you know, around that time, I was really going through a lot of mixed emotions, and this album really was there for me at that time. And it really changed my mindset on life, and I'll go as far to say as this is one of my favorite albums of all time now. And I think I've said that before in some other videos or talked to other people about it, but seriously, this album has impacted me that much. I also owe a lot to this album because it showed me new friends, and you know, it got me into a lot more bands and heavier albums as well, and I really owe it a lot because it really shaped a lot of the music taste that I have today. And you know, there's just so much to talk about this album. I'll probably save that for the album review because I haven't done one for this yet, but definitely be sometime early next year. There's just so many great and fantastic tracks on this album, like Bringing It Down, Unbecoming, Frequency, Starlight, and Ricochet, and of course the mind-blowingly amazing closer Everglow. It's got to be one of my favorite closers of all time, and I just love how the themes of space and a lot of different things go into this album, and just feels so perfect, you know, almost. And I love what Dustin Bates did with this album, and the band has to be credited as well, because this is fantastic. Some people complain about this album being too electronic and too poppy. While it is very electronic and there are pop influences, that does not bother me whatsoever. I think it adds a lot to this album, and it gives the band their own identity. And for those people, I really don't care what they think about this album. It's my opinion, you know. I'm not going to let them get to me at all, because I'm in love with this album, and I will be to the day I die. And like I said, it's one of my favorite albums of all time, and I'm not going to care what other people think, because I don't want to, you know, bow to other people for this. And so, yeah, that's pretty much my list, guys, and that's why Vessels is my number 1 favorite album of 2017. Alright guys, that was my top 10 favorite albums of 2017 list. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I know this video was very long, but you know, it is a year-end list, so they're obviously always going to be long, and I'm sorry about that, but that's just how the way it is, and because there's a lot to talk about with these albums and the honorable mentions. But thank guys for watching. Make sure to like the video and subscribe. Stay tuned for more of these year-end list things. I think I might be doing like top 5 worst songs of 2017. and that might be funny. And some other ones, I'm not sure. But stay tuned for more of that and more album reviews. And guys, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I'll see you guys in the next one.